So I'm working on a cartoon history of the Equal Rights Amendment.
Wow.
I'm Jen Dederick. My name's Jen. And my co-writer is, first of all, a fanatical fan of yours, so hi from her. She can't be here. So I'm wondering about, you're talking about it's the legal stuff, when young women say, but wasn't that illegal? And you go, no, it wasn't. How, can you talk a little more about that, like that sort of the legal basis of all this, and how, it's, people keep trying to erode it when we don't always notice it's getting eroded because the public opinion changed so fast that young women don't get that it's based on this sort of legal thing.
Let me talk about the Equal Rights Amendment for a minute, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
That was going to be the last big thing, which everybody had just presumed was going to be so everybody was sure the Equal Rights Amendment would have no trouble whatsoever floating through, and it almost did. Like many other things in this country, it got 9/10 of the way there, and then it sort of started hitting the southern states, and there was a lot of backlash and so on. And it never did pass, and I think one of the reasons was this sense, well, one of it was the exact same thing that's happening at this very moment, a concerted effort on behalf of the right wing to use an issue that in order to push forward a much larger agenda. But there was also, frankly, a real pain on behalf of women who had been traditional housewives, that their role was being sort of just completely overturned and they were being demeaned. And to be honest with you, the women's movement was not always at its best when it came to bringing those women along and supporting them and helping them. The other thing that happened was that the argument on behalf of the Equal Rights Amendment was basically, these laws can never all change unless you have this one big amendment. And in fact, they really all did change because of court, and I mean, it was a huge surprise. Nobody thought that would happen. The argument on the other side was that women would have to go into combat, which was true, that, and then also all that crazy stuff. There would be no more women's bathrooms, there would be no more Girl Scouts, all this bad stuff would happen. But it was very specific bad stuff. While the Equal Rights Amendment people had a more general, well, you just have to put it in the Constitution so it's really there and nothing else can ever happen. And it was just, the fight was so much more on the one side. The one side was much more scared and upset and angry than the other side was specific and directed. And it was sad, but we did survive. And I asked a lot, when I was doing the book, I would ask a lot of the great women of that era whether they thought we should go back there and try again. They had a lot of different opinions, but I think the greatest one was probably, oh my God, no, let's never do that again, please. We've got other stuff to do. So that's kind of, my feeling about the entire thing. It was very sad, but we did survive.
Although what about Scalia saying he wouldn't ever rule for gender equality without the Equal Rights Amendment?
Well, fortunately, even now today, Judge Scalia is not actually running the world. So I think we're okay on that one. And I don't think gender equality is one of the things he's got a whole lot of support behind. And they're not crazy, these judges. I mean, they know the things they can get away with and the things they can't. So on that one, I'm okay anyway. Thank you. Go ahead.
Gail, thank you very much for all you've done for women. I used to read your columns when I had respect for the New York Times. Sorry.
Well,
kind of.
You've hurt my heart here.
Well, news should be everything, not just what suits the newspaper. But anyway, I wanted to say I'm not happy with the advancement of women. I'm fed up with obeying men's rules. There's been no women who sat to debate the Constitution or to draft it. No women, were in the scriptures and they didn't, specify how we should live. It's always the men that decide how we live. And we've been through such ridiculousness like wearing slacks, as you were talking about. And I think men are starting to realise they made a mistake by having women be educated, and now they're backtracking. But I think it's time for women, and I'm trembling right now, but I think we've got to feel the trembling and do it anyway. But technology is expanding way too quickly to leave it in the hands of testosterone.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take your thought. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. I have to say, they used to say in the olden days that A conservative was a liberal who had been mugged. And, during the 70s, we always used to say, a liberal is a conservative who has just had twin daughters. And I have never run into a guy who did not want his daughters to have, be able to be in Little League and be able to become a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court if possible, and that gives me hope every day. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Greg. I'm a graduate student here.
Hey.
And I was wondering if you had any thoughts about this future problem, which you just brought up at the end about what to do with the children.
Yeah. Well, during the Nixon administration, Congress passed a bill creating a national entitlement of quality early childhood education for every family in America that wanted it, and after-school programs. And it was vetoed by Richard Nixon at the urging of Pat Buchanan, who was on his staff then. And when I wrote the book, I called Pat Buchanan, who was thrilled and said, yes, I was the one who did that. And I've been on television with him a couple of times since then. He always says during intermission, can you tell the part, Gail, about how I destroyed the rights of children to have? He's so pleased about this. So anyway, that's where we're kind of at on that. Early childhood education is so interesting to me because everybody that I know that worries about any issue virtually, all the guys like my fellow columnists like Tom Friedman and Nick Kristof are obsessed with the only way to fix the international affairs is to have more early childhood education. David Brooks thinks the only way to get the world to have better values is to have early childhood. Everybody thinks this is the answer, but they don't do anything about it. It's just incredible to me. At the beginning of this year, Barack Obama said the one thing he was going to do was to do a cigarette tax so that there would be universal pre-K for 4-year-olds. That has vanished. Well, many things have vanished this year, but that one is so gone. This needs to be an international and national, crazed rallying point of people who are irrational and are threatening to primary people who don't agree with them, which is really the only way you get anything right now. So that would be my answer. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, Gail. I'm Ann. Thank you for your talk.
Hi, Ann.
I went to college in the early 70s, and I also feel a little bit like you that I got there just after all of the upheaval, and yet it's so striking and amazing to be reminded of what it was like. I only wish my college-age daughters were here to hear you. I feel sometimes, though, having worked all these years, that now that we got 80% of the way, that good enough is good enough, and we've slowed down, and that while discrimination and prejudice is not what people wake up and think about, it's still there right under the surface. So I'd love to get your thoughts about kind of what are the big challenges ahead. The women numbers on boards has just stayed for the last decade at the same number. So we still have a ways to go, and I'd love to get your thoughts about, besides the balance issue, what are the other major challenges that we have today?
Yeah, let me just suggest 3 things. One of them is that the child care thing sloshes over into everything else. I truly believe one of the major reasons we don't have more women in the U.S. Senate is because women start in politics later than men do. And they do that because they wait till their kids are older. It is not humanly possible to run for the United States Senate and be a full-time or part-time even caregiver of children. You've got to have a spouse who is just totally there, or a mother has moved in with you forever or something like that. It's just, you can't do that on the side. It's too impossible. So the child care thing, I think, sloshes into a lot of other things. Another is that so many of the problems today, although they are about gender, they're also about class. The problems, the great crushing problems for women today are problems of single women without high school educations, struggling to keep their kids going and keep themselves going. People like that. For middle class, college educated women, it's a whole different world. And for them, whenever they ask me how you manage to combine child rearing and family rearing with careers, the answer is always you pick the right partner. That's just it. That's what you do. And I have to say that if you look at the countries in the world that have a decent reproduction rate, the ones that don't are all countries that have terrible attitudes toward women, toward men helping. Men are terribly chauvinistic, and you don't have any state programs to support. You need one or the other. And we're terrible on the state side here, but I do think that our guys are better in general. I really do, I mean, than most other countries. So we've worked well on that end. So those would be my three. It's class, it's about childcare, and the guys are better. That would be my three thoughts. Is that not?
Thank you.
Hi, Gail.
Hi.
My name is Caitlin.
Hi, Caitlin.
Thank you so much for your speech. I really enjoyed it. You mentioned that you benefited greatly from all of the work that women did before you, and you didn't face a lot of the issues in the workplace that women, such as the stewardesses, did. However, I find that hard to believe, considering the traditionally male-dominated newsroom work environment that you entered. So I'm sure you had your set of challenges. So what advice would you give women today who are thinking about entering or are planning on entering male-dominated industries, such as the technology sector, for instance?
The absolute number one important thing is you help other women. You support other women in your group. You know, you work together. You don't feel so overwhelmed by, your littleness and the entire larger gender group that you don't look and seek out and work with other women. And the other is you just enjoy your woman thing and being a woman and go ahead and do it. It's always difficult to be a small number of people in a larger organization. There's stuff that, you miss out on. But most businesses today are so desperately competitive in terms of trying to get stuff done and stay alive and make a profit that they tend to reward good work, whatever it is, but support other women. That would be my number one virtue goal there. Okay, thanks.
Hi, my name is Nasha, and
Hi,
I'm a little
Nasha.
starstruck right now because I was introduced to the women's movement through your books.
Oh my
and
God, thank you.
I ended up going to Barnard College, and I feel like that's how I really learned about second wave feminism and the movement in the 60s. It kind of ended in school with the suffragist movement. And I feel like I'm at the ed school, and I feel like a lot of the kids that I taught didn't see women in history, didn't read the stories about women in history, and so they feel like it's the men who made history in America and in the world. How do we combat that?
Well, you're doing a lot if you're teaching them. They're seeing you, and you're a role model. It's interesting the different messages that kids get today. I know some kids, especially friends of mine who have kids in places like Washington or California, who are not at all clear that men are allowed to be U.S. senators because they haven't seen one. It's been these amazing women for 20 years or so. My niece, for a while, was not clear because my sister was so infatuated with Hillary Clinton so early on that she wasn't sure men were allowed to run for president when she was really young. So they pick up stuff as they go along. History books get rewritten. You have some amazing women's historians right here in this place that are always coming up with new stories. And it's just you. You're going to do it. You're going to fix it. They'll see you, and then you'll tell them stories, and it'll be great. I think we're done now. Just terrific. Thanks very much.
Hi, I'm Michelle, and I'm a senior at the college. I'm from Austin, Texas, so sorry about that mess.
People in Austin, Texas are not really in Texas. They will tell you that themselves.
So I love reading your columns, and I feel like they influence my perspective a lot. And so I was just wondering, who and what do you read, and more broadly, what do you think influences you?
I read, if you read all the Times columnist and all the Times stuff, that takes up a good piece of your day. There's quite a bit there. And I read the Washington Post every day, of course. And I try to keep up as much as possible with the stuff on the web. I love, the women. I love to read Jezebel and some of the feminist blogs out there. And there's some wonderful young writers. Rebecca Traister, whose books I've always loved, has another one coming out very soon. So there's tons of people, who have knocked me out of it. Even when I was a kid, there were a couple of women columnists always. There was Irma Brombrecht. Somebody remember her? She was very funny, but she was very also pointed. And and then Ellen Goodman from the Boston Globe. When I was young, I remember I still have life lessons that I've learned from Ellen Goodman. She wrote one day in the 80s. She said, all the men I know are miserable, and all the women I know are happy. This is because the men that I know all thought they were going to grow up and become president of Harvard, and now they're just professors. And the women all thought they were going to grow up and be manicurists, and now they're professors. And so the women are really, really happy. And now there's a women president of Harvard. So things are even better, you know. I've always loved reading women. There's been amazing women out there writing. You know, Anna Quinlan was an old friend of mine who wrote a column before I did, and I always read her. So there's women's history is so stupendous. If you are interested in that stuff, you know, the first book I did on history, America's Women, basically all I did no original research whatsoever, except interviewing people who were still alive, but most of the time I was writing about dead people. I just read all the books that were out there, and they were so terrific and so amazing, and I just sort of told those stories. So there's tons of stuff, I've got to say. Thank you so much for the question, though.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Julia, and I wanted to ask just a little bit about your approach to writing nonfiction in terms of coming from a journalistic background and approaching women's history, and particularly for the When Everything Changed book, how the thing that I love about your nonfiction is using all of these personal stories and the narratives to kind of ground the larger themes. And so I was just curious how you kind of found the kernel that you were working with throughout your research process.
That was so much fun. Both of those books were so much fun. Although When Everything Changed was much harder because you were talking about people that were not yet dead. So they were, you know, capable of coming at you and yelling at you if you screwed things up. But I had a lot of researchers. They were mostly college students. They're mostly women. And I would give them demographics like, you know, find me a woman who was working in 1965 and who was married and had one child or more. And they mostly often went and found their relatives, which was good because the relatives will tell you a lot more than a stranger will. So then they transcribed those, and I had these monsters. Someday I will give them to somebody because I have these wonderful, endless sort of transcripts of people's lives that were so much fun to read. And then I got to talk to people, some of whom I'd never met before, like Gloria Steinem and Robin Morgan and all the kind of the heroines who are still out there, and that was great fun. And then when I put it together, I don't know if you noticed, but I tend to write in little chunks.
Yeah, I love it.
This is partly because I can only think in little chunks, but you know, every chapter is divided in little chunks. And I also feel that the readers today can barely get past more than a chunk, so it's sort of a dual thing that works for me. I'll always be writing in chunks, I think, no matter what. Thank you.
Hi, I'm short.
Hi. Keep at it. Go on. Me too.
My name's Catalina, and I'm a journalism student at Emerson College, and I'm taking a class right now called Women in the Media. And my professor, Carol Simpson, was a news anchor for a long time, and she suffered a lot of discrimination and harassment based on being a woman of color. And sometimes what my peers and I like to think she's just trying to get a rise out of us. She'll ask, don't you guys think it's just boys being boys, that at some base level, men will always want to discriminate against women because they have this macho desire to have power, whereas women will just take it because they're women. And we'll fight with her until the very end of class, saying that it's a cultural issue and that boys will be boys is just an idea that's come from generations of a patriarchal society. But how would you respond to Carol
I think
Simpson?
she's just trying to get a rise out of you.
I think so too. Yeah.
No, I mean, it used to be when I was first in newsrooms, Nora Ephron wrote, her last play was about tabloid journalism in the 80s and in the places that I worked. And, you know, and part of it was, my only contribution to Nora's play was I told her that, you know, this story was all about guys wanting to continue to create that Breslin atmosphere that used to exist, and there weren't any women in those newsrooms to speak of. But they adapted really fast. I mean, you would not believe. There were a couple of suits, you know, a couple of people got in trouble, and overnight, you know, guys who had been grabbing bottoms forever, guys who had been making off-color remarks forever, they were transformed. It's amazing how easy it is to not do that stuff if you're just empowered by a lawsuit or something. So no, I think it's very easy to get past it, and I think every guy out there is capable of getting past it, just as every person out there is capable of getting past their other issues that we have to get past. Thank you.
Me too, thank you.
We'll take these last two, and then that'll be good, I think.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Susan, and I teach at Tufts University, and this may seem like a strange way to begin, but I was using the women's room at Tufts the other night, and on the wall there's a lot of graffiti, and this one was particularly interesting because it said, who are your role models? Who are your female role models? And the answers included things like my mom, and Tina Fey, and Amy Poehler, and Beyonce. But there were no Hillary Clintons, there was no Gail Collins, there was no Susan Collins.
Oh, it's just because we're too old. They'll get around to it. It's okay.
No, but do you worry at all about the next generation and their role models if they do tend to still think in terms of kind of star-struck celebrity culture?
No, I mean, Amy Poehler, I think, is very cool. I mean, she would be a role model. Tina Fey is amazing. And you know, every time I go anywhere now, somebody brings up Miley Cyrus, which has not happened so far tonight. But, you know, when you're young, you want to relate to younger people. And there are fortunately not many very youthful U.S. senators or presidential candidates. I don't know if there are many guys in their bathrooms when they're writing about role models, you know, or saying, you know, John Boehner, or, you know, it's just... Thank you so much. I love that question. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jen Lerner. I'm a professor at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and this year I'm a Radcliffe Fellow. And I am just awestruck at the influence you've had and how you have, over the course of your career, opened people's minds. And I wonder, what advice would you have for academics in order to really bring more of our research into the public discussion? And in particular, can you comment on how well you think the behavioral sciences, psychology, economics, et cetera, are doing at working with journalists like you and through other media to share the fruits of our research?
You know, thank you for the question. It's really tricky. Once in a while, when I was editorial page editor, I would go out and I would talk to groups in which that was that question, and what about, you know, all the great thinking that's going on in academia? How can we get it into your op-ed pages? And it's very tricky because you've got to be able to write the stuff in a way that regular people will easily digest. And we have now come, when I started in the business, I used to say that people had the attention span of a gnat and you had to work around that. But now it's like a baby gnat with ADT. I mean, it's nothing. I mean, it's like this much and they're gone. They've got stuff here, they can check their email. So it's, I think sometimes academics don't appreciate how difficult it is to write in a way that's readable. And I think sometimes we in the media don't appreciate how important it is when you're writing academic papers and you're trying to move things along a little bit in a discussion that's been going on for time, that how careful you've got to be and how specific you've got to be and how you can't just make these sort of happy generalizations all the time. So there has to be an appreciation on both sides of the trickiness of the other person's job. And, you know, sometimes it's just a matter of you're talking to journalists and getting them to translate. I know, you know, that's what we do. We don't have original thoughts. We just take yours and we try to translate them for the regular people. So that's the best advice I can give. And I think right now the advice will be that we're done, but thank you so much. I just so appreciate it.